If you were to go backwards and kind of let's just put you in a younger you, let's say you're 16 or 20 years old as you were getting started. If you could go back and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself to try and speed your learning and growth along?
If you don't believe in yourself, then there's zero chance that you're going to be successful with it, right? Like if you have anything worthwhile that's worth achieving, then it comes with first allowing yourself to believe it's possible, and then taking action and becoming the person that deserves to achieve the goal.
Michael, welcome to the podcast today. I'm so excited to have you here. Michael, to just do a quick introduction for people who may not know him. So he is not only a friend, but an incredible person that has done so much for the music industry. He started Modern Musician and has literally coached, we're talking thousands and thousands of people on and taught you've given so much to so many people to help them to understand how to be an independent musician. You've got your Gold Artist Academy. You've got mastermind trips. We've been to Costa Rica together with a music mastermind trip. I don't know whether he's a musician. He's done hundreds of thousands. I don't know, you've hit the million mark, I guess, on some of your videos, but the guy knows what he's talking about. I guess that's what I'm trying to share with you for an introduction. So I guess help me fill in the
4 million streams to be exact.
So Michael, share a little bit about yourself. I probably did a terrible job introducing you right there, but give people a little bit of your background. How did you get started in music?
No, that was great, man. I want you to follow me around. You're like my personal hype up man. That made me feel great. I got fuzzies as you shared that.
Good.
Sorry, what was the first question that you just asked?
You know what? Let's just dive in. So people share a little bit about your background. How did you get started in music? Were you the kid that had a mean mom like I was that made you practice piano? Where did you get started, and how did you and like share your journey of how you got to where you're at today, and share a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so it's funny. I think we had a similar upbringing as it relates to piano lessons. Piano lessons at the time, I started playing when I was about 5 years old, and definitely didn't enjoy playing piano back then. Like any 5 or 6 year old, I don't think, at least I've never seen a 6-year-old who's like, I love playing piano and being disciplined and sitting down at one place at a time. But my parents bribed me with video games when I was growing up. And that was how they got me to stick with it. And oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for that, because now looking back on my life, I can see that one habit, that one decision was really what led to me to the greatest blessing of my life. Like my wife and my kids and my business and my best friends all came from knowing how to play piano and go on tour and kind of share that gift. So I'm super grateful for that. Although at the time, when I was 6 years old, I certainly wouldn't have appreciated that.
So was there a time as you were growing up, was it like your teenage years where you all of a sudden were like, maybe this is fun, and maybe, how did that happen?
Yeah. I think that was right around the time when I was in high school and realized, so I mean, I was a pretty socially awkward kid in high school. I was very, very shy. Really kind of kept to myself, very quiet. And, sometimes felt like, I don't know, like a loner or a loser, like I didn't really fit in. And when I was in high school, I realized that playing piano and playing guitar and performing was one of the, I mean, I wasn't good at sports, really. I wasn't very charismatic or outspoken. So I didn't have a whole lot going for me, but music was something that when I played music and I performed, then there's a bunch of friends and a bunch of girls that would come up and would pay attention to me in a way that I wasn't used to. And so I think that it was probably around high school when I realized that playing music was something special, and it was a way that I could express myself, especially when I didn't have a whole lot of other tools that I knew how to do that.
When you say that girls would all of a sudden pay attention to you, I remember sitting on the piano fighting with my mom. I was probably in like 4th grade, and we had somebody that was staying at the house, and he came up and he says, Jason, you will find out that girls love guys who play piano. And I remember it was like a 3rd or 4th grade. I'm like, ew, what?
No, there's
totally true.
People tell you that for a long time. It's for most of that time you're like, I don't care about that, until you do.
And then all of a sudden high school hits and you're like, wait a minute. Now I'm cooler than the football players, right? So yeah. So you ended up playing piano, and then I mean, what was that journey? You ended up having a band, I know, and you toured and did, quite well with that. So what, give us a little bit of background there.
Yeah. So in high school, started performing kind of local open mic nights with a few classmates, and started a bit of an unofficial band with a few. I mean, I grew up in Vermillion, South Dakota, so a very small town, probably like 2 or 3 thousand people year round. And we had started this band, and in junior and senior year of high school, we started practicing every day, and we started competing in local battle of the bands. And things started to, I mean, we were in Vermillion, South Dakota, so it wasn't like the competition was super fierce, but we won a few local battle of the bands. We won a battle of the bands in Minneapolis called Rockzilla, where there's like a few hundred people or a few hundred bands that competed for it. And so when it came time to graduate high school, we all had different career paths that we had sort of outlined for us. For me, I was planning on going to medical school and becoming a dentist, mostly because I had done research, and this meant like pretty good hours and pretty good pay. So like that seemed like a decent living. And in retrospect, I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, if I was like, for me personally, like working on teeth is not something that I think was really in my DNA, or what I was like, what really like my dream life. But that was the plan. And then, nothing against dentists. I think the dentists are amazing. Like I'm very grateful for my local dentist. It's an amazing service. But so in high school, when we were getting ready to graduate, we had a decision to make where either like 3 of us had full ride scholarships, and we're planning on going to college, or we could take a year off and pursue the band, and give it a shot. And I remember kind of a turning point. It's rare that you have one of those moments or those experiences where you can look at it and think, this is where my road forked into two, and my life would be completely different if it wasn't for this one single conversation. And I think back to when, like, the day that I met my wife is one of those big ones. But another big one was this fork in the road, where we had a conversation with one of our first producers, was this guy named Jordan Schmidt. And he was the first producer that we worked with that, yeah, I think for a lot of musicians, here's a learning lesson, and it's something that we certainly didn't appreciate until we had this experience, was how huge of an impact working with the right producer can make on the quality of your music. There was like a point before we had that experience where I think we just thought you're either super talented and your music sounds great, or like you're not talented, your music doesn't sound good. And we had no understanding that, like, of how big of an impact the production makes on the overall outcome, on the product of your music. And there's probably artists, if you're a musician listening to this right now, there's probably artists who are much less talented than you, who are super successful, have amazing music. And it's not necessarily because they're more talented than you, but it's because they're working with the right producer. And, for us, that first experience was with Jordan Schmidt, who he was up and coming at the time, and now we got lucky to meet him when we did, and now he's like a multi-platinum award-winning songwriter and producer. But we had a conversation with him where we were telling him our plans with the band, that we were thinking about going to college and rehearsing at the same time and doing the band at the same time. And he pressed pause, and he stopped. He said, "Look, if this is a really important decision that you guys are about to make, and it's really kind of up to you based on your goals. But you should know that if your number one goal is to be successful with the band, that's not going to happen if you go to college. It's the bands who are successful are the ones who have no plan B, and they go all in. And so if you do that, just know that that you're not going to be successful with the band if that's your number one goal." And because of that conversation, we looked at our options and realized that we could defer our scholarships for a year and have a full year to pursue the band full time and give it our all and leave it all on the table. And then after the year, we could decide, do we want to go to college and and transition. And so that year was when we went all in and we worked our butts off. And we basically crawled over broken glass to figure out some of the things that don't work and to figure out a few things that did work. But one of the first lessons that we learned was, we worked really hard to book our first tour. And I remember back in the day, we were on MySpace, reaching out to a bunch of bands locally and trying to
And a date us, Michael, if you start talking about MySpace.
Right. This was like 2010. This is over 10 years ago. And so I remember being so proud because we booked our first tour, and we learned really quickly that it's not enough to just book the shows. You actually have to figure out how to get people to come out to the shows. Right. And so I remember our first tour, we were playing shows like nobody, just the bartender in the back of the room. In some cases, we had to lug our gear up like 3 flights of stairs to play a show to an empty room, so nobody. And at the time, we were sleeping in our van, eating peanut butter tortillas for breakfast, lunch, and dinner just to save as much money as possible. And my parents would call like, "How are things going?" Like, "It's awesome, it's great." But clearly, like it was not. We were like the definition of starving artists. And I would say probably, if I had to rank biggest lessons learned or like most important transformations or turning points in my life, this would probably be in the top 3 for sure. Was this idea that our lead singer came up with, which now we've come to call tour hacking. And this one idea took us from that place where we were living in our van, sleeping in Walmart parking lots, eating peanut butter tortillas, to selling 24,000 CDs in about 6 months. And because of that, we got an opportunity to open for one of our favorite bands growing up, which was called All Time Low. And they had millions of fans. And so we went basically from sleeping in our vans to touring with an artist that had millions of fans and playing shows for thousands of people a night in the course of 6 months. And that idea, in a nutshell, was, I think our singer got this idea from some bands at Warped Tour. Warped Tour is a festival where there's a ton of pop punk, pop rock, kind of emo scene bands who were playing this festival. And in between the shows, some bands would walk around and meet people and have headphones where they share their songs, and if they liked it, they would offer a CD. And we thought, what if we take that idea, but we do it on the road? Because it didn't seem like the people were doing that at the festival, but no one had really done that just at a normal tour. And so, our favorite bands, when they went on tour, like All Time Low, Mayday Parade, Blink-182, they had millions of fans. And before their shows, they'd have thousands of people waiting out front on the side of the street, sometimes for like 12 hours in advance, just sitting there on a blanket, waiting to get a good seat in line for a show. And so we thought, what if we walk up to those people and introduce ourselves and share some of our music and just build a relationship, connect with as many people as possible. And if they liked it, we had a backpack full of CDs and we would offer a CD. And I was a super shy, awkward kid, so like that didn't come naturally at all. I remember shaking and stuttering as I walked up to people. But what we found was that strategy worked incredibly well. And between the 6 of us, we sold 24,000 CDs in about 6 months. And because of that, one of the bands that we were tour hacking on, All Time Low, heard about what we were doing. And we weren't trying to keep it a secret. Like every single band that we hopped around probably 12 different tours, and every time we would give someone a CD in line and ask if they could give it to the headliner, and we would stay after the show and try to meet them as much as possible. And we actually were able to connect with some like truly amazing musicians just by hustling our butts off and trying to connect with them and being there at every show. But one of them was All Time Low, and they gave us the opportunity to open for them on their next tour. And you can bet that when that happened, I mean, first of all, when we first learned that, I remember jumping up and down like a little girl, and it was like that scene from that movie, That Thing You Do, when they first hear themselves on the radio and they all start flipping out and jumping around. It's just this like amazing excitement. That experience. I'll never forget the moment that we learned that we were going to be able to tour with them.
You have that happy cry moment. It's like, oh my gosh, I just did it. Now what? Like, but it's like, it's hard to describe unless you've had it. And it's not very many times you get that in your life, I don't think either.
Absolutely. It was just a dream. It was a dream come true. It was surreal. I guess the best way I could describe it is surreal. And I remember being backstage with them and seeing them for the first time. And this was like our first, I don't know, experience meeting our idols or like in being able to share the stage with them. So it just didn't seem real at first. It was just like, it was amazing. And they were super good. Like they're some of the best guys too. They're like brought us under their wing, and they were just really, really cool guys. And that opportunity led to kind of like a snowball where we got to meet a lot of our favorite bands that we really look up to and tour with them. And in some cases they ended up even opening for us, which was really humbling. And we toured for about 10 years full time. We in that time, we released an album that hit number 2 on iTunes as an alternative rock album. We got about 24 million streams on Spotify, and we toured around the world, playing music full time independently without a record label, which is kind of a new thing. I mean, all those bands that we were touring with, for the most part, they had a record label and they had an established, they had a manager, but we did it independently. We didn't have a manager or a record label. We were just 6 friends from Vermillion, South Dakota, who were stumbling their way through this world and figuring out how to market ourselves, right? And so that was my life for about 10 years. And I'll say too about tour hacking. Like the reason I think that was one of those pivotal moments was because before tour hacking, I was super shy, awkward kid, didn't feel comfortable in my own skin, and walking up to those strangers waiting in lines for shows, meeting thousands of people face to face, interacting with them, I think really helped to overcome the fear of rejection and sort of understand that that I don't know, there's something weird biologically when you're getting ready to walk up to people like strangers. It's so terrifying, like this gripping fear. It's kind of like public speaking. It's not really logical, right? It's not logical to be that terrified, but apparently it was because we evolved in tribes, and so if you got rejected, then you might get ostracized and die, and so that's why we're afraid of it. Apparently,
well, and I think as I think about a lot of people, the whole idea of you may have been told, hey, you can't make money with your music, and I think a lot of people, just to protect themselves, discourage people from doing anything that's scary or out of their comfort zone. And I think you find a lot of family members who are very well intentioned sometimes discourage us from doing the thing that they were scared of, and I think a lot of times that creates, I've heard people call it imposter syndrome, where you feel like, well, I'm not worthy, or I'm not able to do this, even though you feel like you're probably drawn to do that. But it's that scary imposter syndrome that you got to somehow. And it's probably not just with musicians. I think it's almost everything in life, no matter what career path we go down.
100%. Yeah, I think especially early on, very few people have had the experience of connecting with like a artist before they were successful, and then when they became successful. And so it almost seems like it's out of reach or it's impossible because they've just never really like seen it happen. And it's similar to the way that we discovered how big of an impact a producer makes, on the music. Like I think most people, they don't think about that. They just hear an amazing song and they think, wow, this is a really talented artist. Or if they hear, even if it's a super talented artist, if it's like a horrible production, amateur quality, then it's going to sound awful. And it's so easy just to think that it's the artist or it's the talent that's not good enough, when really it's just that one, it was having the right product. But certainly when we were starting out, I remember we got called Paradise Queers in high school. That was a insult back then. But it was really validating, I think, to be able to eventually reach a level of success that, I felt really, really proud of. I remember coming home and playing a hometown show, and all of those people in high school who had, made fun of us, and all of our family members came out, and people fly in from like all over the country to come to this hometown show in Vermillion, South Dakota. And we played this amazing show, and I remember my sister like walking up afterwards, and you're like signing autographs and taking pictures for fans after the show, and there's definitely something special, and it's probably a large part of it is just based in my ego, and of wanting to feel special. But it certainly felt very validating, very fulfilling to go from that initial point where we were made fun of to a point that we were able to accomplish something that we'd always dreamed of.
Well, and I guess thinking about this, as you're talking about that, I think one of my takeaways that I'm hearing, and I hear from a lot of artists, is believing in yourself and having that confidence that you are good enough and that you're capable. If I was rewinding the clock, had you been able to go back and tell yourself, look, believe in yourself, you can do this, you're good enough, and somehow have that confidence instilled in you 10 years earlier, think of the difference that would have made. And I think that's probably, my guess is, you've worked with thousands of artists and talked to, I don't know how many, you probably lost count of how many people you've impacted or reached. But do you find that belief in oneself is one of the key things that is a determination of success, or thrown in the towel?
100%. Let's say it's probably like the key determinator, like of whether you can or you can't. It's like, was it Henry Ford? He said, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And you certainly don't become successful by not believing it's possible and thinking you can't do it, right? Like there's no way you're going to do it and be successful doing it if you don't believe that you can. And yeah, there is something, it's difficult to have that belief early on when you haven't experienced the fact of it, or you haven't experienced, like, you have to cultivate that belief either in yourself, like you have to allow yourself to cultivate that in yourself and believe that no matter what happens, you're going to make it work, and to be okay with learning along the way. And it's not going to be instant, and you'll have to learn along, you have to make mistakes, and you'll probably have to embarrass yourself and look stupid sometimes. Like you really have to be okay with looking stupid. Because if you don't, then you just don't ever put yourself out there. You don't learn, right?
Right.
And so I think that there's a huge amount of that, and even like for us, we had to cultivate that, and I think that we sort of did that for each other with Paradise Fears. Like we cultivated that belief in each other, and we were always, we had different phrases that we would say. Like I remember one. And these are just like silly phrases, but I remember there's one thing we should be like, straight to the top, like straight to the top. We're going to make it straight to the top. And there's just like a funny like banter. You're like straight to the top. And there's a few different phrases like that, but I just remember almost mantras or things where like we would kind of carry that pep or that energy where it's like that, that I think that's really important. And not everyone has that, and we're certainly like really fortunate to. I think all of our families were supportive of what we were doing, right? Like they didn't like give us anything like financially to like to support us, because none of our, like my parents grew up on food stamps, and they were able to turn things around, and they were some of my biggest role models. But anyway, they were very supportive in the sense that they believed in us and they were proud of us, and they weren't trying to make us feel guilty about what we were doing, or kind of bringing that fear or that sort of that doubt. Yeah, they were never bringing the doubt. They were always encouraging, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big struggle for a lot of people is like they have someone in their lives who's close to them who's bringing the doubt. And it's not because they don't love you necessarily or they don't want you to be successful, at least on the surface. Yeah, but it's mostly just from fear. Right? It's from fear or something.
They're trying to protect you. It's trying to do what's, because it's a scary world out there if you do go all in on music. So you were kind of you ended up touring in 10 years, and I mean you were kind of on top, or achieving that success, I guess, as whatever you described of it. But you're not touring anymore, and I'm not even sure the band does the band even get together anymore to perform? I mean, you made this total turn, and I think that's an important thing for people in music to realize. Maybe you do need to go different directions. So where did that go, and how did you get there?
Yeah. Yeah. So that was about 10 years into touring. I had met the love of my life at a show. And when we got married and we started thinking about having a family, I was gone for 10, 11 months out of the year. And it wasn't really like living a lifestyle very conducive to being a good father or good husband. And that year and we were all kind of moving in different directions too. Like our lead singer has published several books now. He's a screenplay writer, and we were all kind of like moving in some different directions. And I remember that year after we stopped touring full time was one of the most difficult years of my life from a standpoint of my whole life was the band. My whole life was what we focused on with Paradise Fears. And for that year, I remember just sort of feeling like, who am I without the band? And I remember also I didn't really recognize at the time because we had just gotten married, but I was really kind of in this transformation of becoming a dad and a father and wanting to start a family. And I remember in that year sort of facing this rock bottom moment where I didn't know how I was going to provide, for my family, both just in terms of being home. Like we relied so much on touring back then. And it's kind of ironic too. A lot of the things that we've learned in the past 5 years as a modern musician, a lot of the things that we teach now are not things that I knew back then. There are things that we learned and things that didn't even exist. Things like digital marketing and funnels and Instagram and Facebook Messenger ads. And these are all like we got our start from hitting the ground and meeting people face to face and touring and playing shows in person. Nowadays, you can do so much online.
Right.
But at the time, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, and I was at this point where I thought, do I need to go back to college? I'd never gone to college. Do I need to go back and get a quote unquote real job? And I remember just feeling like a failure of a husband and a father because I didn't know I couldn't provide for my family, and I had acquired some debt as well. I remember investing in a few different. I was starting a business back then. It was not called Modern Musician. I think it was called like Piano Rockstar or something like that. I was going to do a course on how to play piano, and in retrospect, I mean, if I'd stuck with that, it could have been something interesting. But, I remember doing a launch for that course and making a few $1,000s and just thinking it's not enough. Like I'm not going to be able to support myself or my family with this, and especially because so much of my ego, I think, was wrapped up in what we had accomplished with the band that there was just sort of this identity crisis moment, or I was like, who am I now, and what do I need to do next? And that was another one of those fork in the roads, those turning points, was attending a live event by a guy named Jeff Walker, and he's not related to me. We have the same last name, but he built a business called Product Launch Formula, and TLF. He's like one of the grandfathers of internet marketing, and he basically teaches a course on how to if you've learned something, if you have a valuable skill and you can teach it to other people. He basically shows you how you can turn it into a course and offer a course. And I remember attending this event, and it was right at this point where it was like I needed to figure out what I was going to do next and whether I was going to go back and get a real job. And I remember at this event, it was one of the most special experiences that I had. It was the first time that I was in a group live with all these similar-minded entrepreneurs and positive, this energy in the room. And it's something I've experienced with a lot with the entrepreneurship space. Funnel Hacking Live is a pretty special space. There's high energy. There's a lot of movement and excitement and energy and just positivity, and entrepreneurship is just so incredible. And that was one of the first times I really got a taste of what it's like to be in a community like that. And Jeff gave an offer from the stage on the last day for Launch Club. And Launch Club was his $12,000 coaching program. And keep in mind, like, this is at a point where
you had a $12,000 checkbook. You could totally go write that, right? We totally had the money to do that.
Yeah. Like this wasn't my first thing that I tried. I think I was about $24,000 in debt at that point, and found I was going to be a dad. It's like, I need to figure this out. And that was, that was a point where my wife, as supportive as she's been, and as much as she loves me, like, I think that she was experiencing some fear, rightfully. And so she was bringing some of that doubt, and I had some of that doubt in myself too. Like, can I really do this? Am I really good enough? And it's funny, is there's like a second moment of that was whenever you're starting something new, right? Like there's that moment of, who am I to do this thing? And yes, so I remember attending that event and realizing, like, he gave that opportunity, and I realized that, this is it was similar to that decision point with Jordan Schmidt. It was like, it's the people who go all in, it's the people who burn their bridges that have no plan B are the ones who are successful. And so I went all in, and I remember joining that program, and I did it. This isn't something I would necessarily recommend for anyone else too, because this is a learning lesson. But this is back when, our finances were we were married, but we were still a little bit separate with our finances. And I remember making that decision and joining this coaching program on my own personal credit card, and I didn't tell her about it. And it wasn't until probably a year later where finally things started to gain a little bit of traction. It wasn't until like 9 or 10 months later, that I actually started to kind of gain some traction and start working. And that was another lesson, was, those first like 10 months, I didn't realize at the time, but it was really, it was like planting the seed, right? And letting it nurturing it and letting it grow. And it's not necessarily, as soon as you plant a seed, it's not like this giant blossoming tree with beautiful fruits start to fall immediately, right? It's like you need to plant the seed, and then you need to show up, and you need to nurture it, you need to do the right things. And that's what leads to the fruit growing. And so, I'll kind of fast forward here, because I think I
was gonna throw in here, and now I don't know whether you even know this, but in the latest edition of Jeff Walker's launch book, you have a page or two where they talk about your story. You're featured in his book as a success story of how to do this. You knew that, right? Did you?
He's brought me on stage a few times, and I think in his first edition of the book, we had like a segment where we talked a little bit, but
So you are featured in the Jeff Walker launch book and the audiobook that I just went through. So he spends quite a bit of time telling your story, which, to go from broke and couldn't even afford to do it. And, I think it's well deserved. I mean, you've been able to help and impact a lot of people and find that success. I'm curious, if you were to go backwards, and kind of, let's just put you in a younger you, let's say you're 16 or 20 years old as you were getting started. If you could go back and give yourself some advice, what would you tell yourself now, knowing, because you've interviewed hundreds of people on your podcast that have been successful, other successful musicians, and sharing things. I mean, what would you tell yourself to try and speed your learning and growth along?
Oh man, that's such a good question. I think I would tell myself to be very intentional with who I choose to surround myself with. Yeah, I think there's so much truth in the idea that we become like the 5 people that we spend our most of our time with. And so whether it means like surrounding yourself with the people physically around you, which is great, or just, surrounding yourself, listening to audiobooks, watching, videos, like joining a video course, or, whatever it is that you're looking to do, whatever your goal is, whoever you want to become, figure out who is already doing it and do whatever it takes to put yourself next to them and have conversations with them, or at the very least, just have their presence in your environment. Because I think that that's probably one of the most, important, valuable ways that you can shortcut, or at least make your odds of success 1,000 times more likely. And secondly, I would say what you talked about in terms of believing in yourself. I think that's one that if you don't believe in yourself, then there's zero chance that you're going to be successful with it, right? Like, if you have anything worthwhile that's worth achieving, then it comes with first allowing yourself to believe that it's possible, and then taking action and becoming the person that deserves to achieve the goal. And I think part of that too comes with being willing to make mistakes, being willing to look stupid and not taking it personally, being willing to learn quickly, like just getting something out there. Like it's so easy to procrastinate, or be a perfectionist and want to wait until the right moment when it's ready to do something. And I think that that's one of the biggest dream killers that there is, especially when it comes to music. Like, how many people have died with their music still inside of them because they were waiting for the right
to be perfect, or for the right thing to have. Oh, totally. So that's great advice. So I've got one other question that just popped into my mind so we've talked a lot about success, and everybody's got their own idea of success, but I think Tony Robbins and Russell Brunson, I know I've heard him talk about this as well, but there's like this success, and you hit that pinnacle and you're like, oh yeah, I got the thing and I achieved that thing, and it like lasts all of, maybe a couple days at most, but that like high five moment, and then what? And they talk about, okay, the next level is that fulfillment. And so what would you say, what advice would you have for musicians, or just people in general? How do you, once you achieve that goal of success, how do you find that fulfillment, would you say, in life?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Yeah, it's kind of funny that the things that we think are so important, and those goals and like the achievements, are so unimportant ultimately. Like, as soon as you achieve them, then it's like, well, now what? And there's certainly, like, all of us are going to have that moment where we're on our deathbed and we're sort of looking back at our life and all the stuff that we've built, here, like so much of everything that we were scared of, all of our dreams, everything we're about to say goodbye. And it seems like that's one of the most sobering, kind of like humbling thought exercises to do, is sort of put yourself in that moment where you're about to die, and looking back, are you glad that you lived your life the way that you did? Did you focus on what was actually important? And I think when it comes to success, what is success on the surface? Achievement in goal setting and dream achievement, actualization, is a great surface level thing to strive towards. I think it's like riding a bike, where if we aren't moving towards a goal, if we're not moving towards anything, we're just sitting still on a bike, it's almost impossible to balance, and we end up falling off, right? I think that it's, as humans and our brains, like there's a movement towards actualization. There's a movement towards goal and dream achievement. And to be in the flow and balance, like, we need to have those goals. We need to figure out what's actually a true goal for you, that is, about you stretching into a higher version of yourself. So I don't think it's necessarily like thinking like, oh, like everything, all achievement and all goals are superficial. But at the same time, on a certain level, they are superficial because you achieve them on the surface, but then they don't bring lasting fulfillment in and of themselves. So yeah, I think that's a realm where you have to dig deep within and kind of look at. Um, it's almost like a cliche kind of thing, but kind of embracing the journey and every step of the journey, as it is, being mindful and appreciative, being grateful for what you currently have right now and fully living it, fully being present for it. And I think for a lot of people, that brings up their relationship with God or a universal intelligence or greater being, greater purpose, whatever it is that you resonate with. Or, if you're an atheist, maybe just the universe or nature, itself. But there is, I think that's the level where you can connect with something greater than yourself and recognize your interconnectedness with every other living being, and that connection is where true fulfillment and true liberation comes from.
But as you're saying that, I think what's interesting is in watching your progression, hearing your story, I think you hear about this fulfillment becomes, you're the student and you're living in it. And then all of a sudden, one day you can't do the thing, or you don't do the thing as much, and you become the teacher. And I think the sensei or the master is where you really start to, at least I've seen this in my own life, is, whether it's coaching soccer or even doing music, when I can help somebody else recognize their talent and give them those pointers. And it's interesting to see that, I mean, with your coaching program, you've built an entire business around helping and coaching others. And my guess is you probably found more joy and happiness in helping other musicians than maybe you ever did even performing on the stage. As wonderful as that was at that time, my guess is you've had more feel good, we've achieved something that matters, and are finding that fulfillment. My guess is that's what's probably driven you as much as anything, and you may not even realize it too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're spot on, and the way I look at that is sort of like the same way that my life changed when I became a dad.
Yep.
And I think when I was holding Xander for the first time, and you're seeing a piece of yourself in someone else, and just like so much love for them, and this ripple effect where like they with what we're doing with Body Musician and mentoring and helping other people, they're able to do so much more than I was ever able to do on my own. So there definitely is a deep sense of fulfillment from that.
Awesome. Well, Michael, I know we're out of time. We could probably keep talking for another hour, but if people want to go learn more about what you guys are doing, I mean, I've been through your program, the Gold Artist Academy. It was fantastic, and you guys are doing a lot of great things. Definitely, your podcast is incredible, the Modern Musician podcast. But where can people go to find out what you guys are all about and learn a little bit more?
Absolutely. Yep. So you can either Google Modern Musician, or if you go to masterclass.modernmusician.me, M-E, then you'll go to a registration page for our masterclass. At the time, right now, we do a weekly live masterclass. Usually it's between 2 to 3 hours on Wednesdays. And that's where, if you attend it live, then you can attend it for free. If you want the on-demand version and the replay and everything, then you can purchase an on-demand version for $47. But if you attend it live, then we have a bunch of freebies and resources and things that we hand out for it. And that's, at least right now, that's where we take everything that we're learning with our clients, and we take everything that I've personally learned in the past 12 years from falling on my face and looking stupid. And you can shortcut, you can avoid at least some of the things, some of the places where you might embarrass yourself. At least you can avoid some of those things. So that's probably where I would start, is that masterclass.modernmusician.me.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate all your time and for sharing. It was a great conversation, but great advice. Hopefully this has been helpful to a lot of people and makes them kind of rethink about, their journey and maybe hopefully have the ability to believe in themselves a little bit too. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jason. I mean, you're a great host. Like, these questions have been really, really helpful. And having been able to connect with you personally, you are such both an outstanding student, but also you have so much to offer. So in terms of wisdom and what you've accomplished in your life. And I know where your heart's at in terms of you being able to serve musicians. So thank you for bringing me on here and asking such great questions, kind of holding space to be able to help musicians.
Oh, it's been fun. We'll definitely have to have you back. So I've got several more, but we'll get you back on another one. So thank you. Hey, it's Jason here, and I hope you've gotten a lot of value out of this episode. Be sure to check out our show notes to learn more about our guest today, and if you'd like to support our podcast, there's a few things that you can do to help us grow. First, if you hit subscribe, it will help ensure that you don't miss a future episode. Second, if you'll share it with your friends on social media or send it via email or message, it helps us spread the word as well. And third, if you'll leave an honest review, it really helps with the algorithms so that other people can find our podcast. Finding success and fulfillment in the music industry is possible, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.